Well, we kind of knew this post was going to be coming. I just don't think any of us expected it to be a frickin' college thesis. Holy smokes, this is a long boy. But in any case, Yoshi P has made a post on the Lodestone regarding mod usage and mod usage and culture. I'm concerned. I'm concerned when the director is going to talk about the game culture, especially around mods, because I know things. I know too much. But in any case, they put a note right at the top saying, "We request the cooperation of media outlets and those intending on reposting and comment elsewhere. Please do not summarize or provide only excerpts. We respectfully ask that you link readers to this comment instead." So, in respect to this, I'm going to read it verbatim, possibly skipping around, but I'm going to try and cover as much of it as possible. We'll see. This is a long boy, but I will also include it in, at the very least, the pinned comment. So, hello everyone. Producer and director Naoki Yoshida here. I'd like to address the recent feedback and discussion among the community regarding in-game mods. This post is not meant to target any one mod specifically. Doubt. Doubt. Big doubt. But I'd like to touch on the general subject of mods, their use, and the culture surrounding them. I thank you for understanding. Firstly, while I am in charge of FF14, I am also a PC gamer. I have been for many years. I've spoken about this multiple times in the past, but my own personal stance regarding mods, that I do tolerate them, has not changed. In the past 20 years or so, I've seen numerous positive examples of games with fan-made mods that expand upon existing gameplay. And yeah, I have too. The first thing that comes to mind are randomizers and whatnot. Man, I need to play some free enterprise again. Four randos, so much fun. Anyway, however, these mods are generally created with the vital premise in mind. They are for personal use only, and the individual player is responsible for the mods they use. Furthermore, the mods must not impact the core game, its services, or the intended game design in a negative manner. I personally feel these rules should be followed by all mod creators and users. That being said, if players continue to uphold the above premise of mods, enhancing one's personal enjoyment of the game, and acknowledge they are taking responsibility for what they download, I personally see no reason to track down or investigate gamers for the general use of mods. Of course, from my position leading FF14, I still feel that it is vital for players to follow our user agreement and other rules. Additionally, I'd like to stress the importance that players follow two rules: that their style of gameplay does not infringe upon others, and that they do not negatively impact the core game, its services, or intended game design as mentioned above. It is my sincerest hope that everyone can enjoy playing FF14 as well as other PC games in ways that are enjoyable to them. Below, I'd like to elaborate on what infringing upon others and negatively impacting the intended game design entail. These are merely examples, so I don't mind if you skip over them. Please keep in mind that these theoretical examples do not single out any particular mod. Furthermore, it is not criticism of those who create or use mods. The following is meant to deepen everyone's understanding of our stance in this manner. And I already read this ahead of time, but basically we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 actually wait, at what point does it actually stop being like individual? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it's basically 7 here. All right. 7 paragraphs here that explain that they have ultimate raids, and that you have one theoretical player who has cleared the raids and has their ultimate weapon and title, and then player B who went ahead and used, we'll say, Project G to go ahead and just make themselves appear that they have said ultimate weapon. Okay. And then said that, yeah, there's no harm because, you know, you can make a picture of it and post your screenshot or whatever, but you actually personally, you know, no one else is, you're not getting like false or stolen valor for clearing the ultimate yourself, despite using a mod to go ahead and get the tool that you never actually cleared with, whereas the other person spent months upon months to actually clear the raid. Okay. Then it goes on to go ahead and talk about that if a player chooses to install a mod, the risk of encountering a computer virus, for example, is borne by the individual. Additionally, mods that do not adversely affect other players, which ensure visual changes are only visual to the individual user, can be said to narrowly maintain the integrity of the game design, although, of course, this is open to interpretation. This is where the doesn't target any one specific mod, that mask kind of almost flies off. All right. However, if a mod was updated and changes became visible not just to the individual mod user, but to other players as well, what would the implications be? Player A with their title and gear earned from hours of concerted effort with friends, and player B with their mod-derived gear are now on a level playing field, so to speak. This development may not concern player B, but for player A, it considerably negates the cooperation time and effort invested. Not to mention the pride they might have felt in their achievement. After all, the rewards are now available to anyone with the mod installed, albeit lacking the corresponding in-game attributes. Now, the only problem with this, using Project G and Mare Synchronos, by the way, that was the mod that was shut down that caused all this discord in the first place. I had several posts talking about Mare Synchronos and other videos talking about it. Feel free to check those out. But basically, Mare Synchronos let other people that you share a code with, you get to see each other's characters as though as they appear to you with visual cosmetics, with mods. So any sort of modifications you do to your character, Mare Synchronos would let other people see it. So if I went ahead and used mods to go ahead and make myself look like a top tier raider, they'd see that. But the problem is that the moment they inspect my character to see the name of the gear, they'd find out I'm a phony. Like immediately. And there's no mod that can circumvent that. Just because that data is pulled from the FF14 server. Yeah. So like this whole thing, and this goes on for a while, about how player A, you know, goes through all the effort of getting the ultimate weapon and the legend title and clearing the ultimate raid. Not to mention the amount of time they had to spend before clearing the savage tier to get the best gear to even start attempting the ultimate raid. That's almost like, to try and say they're on a level playing field, they're not. Because it's so easy to find a pretender. It really, really is. So like this whole argument here, I don't even know many, I've only ever seen like once or twice anyone actually try to be a fake ultimate raider. It's also especially given away when you see some someone on Mare and Kronos with the ultimate weapon, and then a whole slew of other cosmetic mods that are very clearly not in the game. So I'm sorry, Mr. Yoshi P or Yoshida-san. I think this is a moot argument. I don't think that's an issue at all, because I don't think it's fooling. I'd say it's not fooling anyone, but there were 200 people dumb enough to sign a petition thinking that would convince a multi-billion-dollar company to allow mods. So I guess I'm the idiot here. Actually, no, they are. They're really, really dumb. But in any case. But moving on in their example. In this example, other players may have been infringed upon the intended design of the game, have been negatively impacted. Although player B may have been unaware of their mod's precise functionality, their usage has diminished the other player's motivation, circumvented the game's systems. Even if the creator of the mod simply intended for players, although player B may have been unaware of the mod's precise functionality, their usage has diminished the other player's motivation and circumvented the game's systems, even if the creator of the mod simply intended for players to readily access and enjoy their favorite gear. They have detrimentally affected both the game and the wider player community. Maybe JP is just more convinced by that. I don't know. I would honestly say what hurts the ultimate prestige more than anything is the buying clears for ultimates kind of section of things, where a group of 7 absolute cracked out of their mind elite raiders sell their 8th slot to someone who is not as skilled and not as good at raiding for either gil or, well, it happens, but real money. They get their clear because the other 7 are cracked out of their minds and absolute gods at the game. They collect their payday, and the 8th person who can barely clear a savage has an ultimate weapon. That hurts far more than using Project G and Mare and Kronos to fake clearing an ultimate, I would argue. Because you end up with a lot more people who very clearly never cleared an ultimate and might not have even cleared a savage running around with these trophy weapons. But I digress. In response, our only option has been to ask players cease using the mod, or to request that the mod creator removes the functionality causing the problem. Of course, we could also implement preventive measures in game, but this would divert programming resources from other areas, potentially damaging the enjoyment of other players in the long run. All right, real quick on this. Yeah, before I even hit recording, I told myself I'm just going to read the whole thing, then save all my comments for the end. And I am sucking at that right now. But in any case, during the interview with Xenos, Floof, the developer of Mare, kept saying they only got a legal inquiry. everyone just assumed, including myself, that it was a cease and desist. This here is saying it technically wasn't. The term legal inquiry was always interesting. Because if it was a cease and desist, you just go ahead and get the word saying it was a cease and desist. You just say it. But he kept saying a legal inquiry. I'm now curious. Did they just try to go ahead and just say, hey, can you go ahead and remove the ability for Mare to sync this, that, and the other thing? Can we just please put an end to syncing ultimate weapons and a few other things that we'll talk about in a second? I'm now curious. And just Floof looked at the request and just went, I want to stress though, if the legal inquiry was in fact to just remove some of that functionality from Mare, and Floof looked at that and just said, yeah, I'd rather just bail, I don't blame Floof. And honestly, I don't blame anyone for getting a request like that as a mod developer and just saying, you know what, I don't need that in my life. You're doing this for fun. It's a passion project for you. It's not anything major. You know, you don't want to go ahead and I have a light flickering over there. That's fantastic. You don't want to deal with any of that sort of stuff. I get that. All right. You don't want to deal with the headache of the company you've been trying to just like work in the shadows of and not try to draw their look, and now all of a sudden they're making demands of you. You just be like, you know, I don't need that stress in my life, especially since this could very, very quickly result in real legal action, which may result in paying large sums of money. I don't know where this is going to go, and I think I'd rather just say I'm out. I understand that. Okay, that light's now dead. I understand that perfectly. I don't blame Floof at all for that decision. Okay. Moving on, though. And the scenario outlined above is just one example, but I hope it helps clarify the difference between mod usage within the realm of individual enjoyment and mod usage which is damaging to the game itself. Some players might ask, well, what about a mod which only makes changes visible to other users of the same mod? The issue is that any mod which makes changes visible to others requires manipulation or rewriting of the game files, which fundamentally is even more problematic and destructive. I mean, wouldn't have done that no matter what. I mean, the thing is that the way Mare worked, because it used Project P and G, it never directly rewrote any of the game files. No damage was ever being done to the client itself. The client was simply being fooled to pull a different file instead of the one from its own resource file. So theoretically, and I'm not a dev of that sort of stuff in any way, shape, or form. I have basic knowledge of this sort of stuff. Theoretically, there was no damage to the game files at all. there was manipulation going on for sure. And I do want to stress, I do get it. All right. I do get that, you know, I'm making excuses for the functionality of Mare and doing a whole lot of, well, actually, but it's Square's game. They reserve the right to go ahead and enforce the rules of the game however they see fit. And considering the fact the rules say absolutely not black and white, if you go ahead and do if you do any of this, you will be extinguished from the world entirely. The fact that we're even given a gray area, and a gray area that's being written out, we honestly should be kind of grateful for. All right. I'm just saying. In any case, even supposing that there is theoretical mod provided, I'm sorry, even supposed that this theoretical mod provided generous improvements to the game, which was received by all players, the moment a problematic feature is introduced to said mod, we must insist that players stop using it. G-Shade. Another example of such feature, a mod that allows players to freely equip optional items to and display them to others. What does that say to the players going through the trouble of saving up to purchase these goods from the FF14 online store? Here we go. Are these players not losing out by not using the mod? The thing is that when Mare goes down, now you look like a fool. Now it is the Emperor's new robes. You are now exposed. I actually do know a lot of visual modders and people who would go ahead and actually buy the in-shop version just so that when for those people that are not synced when out, and also for when Mare went down, they didn't look like absolute fools. But no, admittedly, cosmetic outfits definitely are going to be the sales that are most cannibalized by things like Project G and Mare. Okay. Some may say that Square Enix is to blame for trying to make money by demanding that players spend extra on optional items. We operate our servers and data centers 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, with the hope that our players can enjoy a reliable gaming experience. Currently, global inflation is taking a toll at a rapid pace, driving up server electricity costs, the cost of land, and even the price of servers themselves. We do not want to increase subscription fees to players, if at all possible, but keeping our game running requires sufficient income. If we start creating a deficit, FF14 may no longer be able to operate. This is an example of damage dealt to the services we provide. On that note, yes, outfit sales are cannibalized by Project G and Mare. Counterpoint though, emote sales are almost required to increase thanks to Project P and Mare. The venue scene where people just dance the night away at their various nightclubs and whatnot. If you want to use custom dances, you have to use a very specific emote for each one, for each dance. And it's whatever emote the developer of the dance chooses. And quite often they end up using cash shop ones just because either A, the seasonal event that had them had certain parts of the animation that made the swap very easy or made the swap even possible, or B, were just always on the cash shop for the same sort of reason. So Like if you wanted like a very specific dance, it's just like, oh, I need to go get the Popoto step or whatever. You're going over to you're buying from the Square shop anyway. So I would say the whole Mare thing, as far as cannibalizing sales, it's actually there's actually a chance it might have increased shop sales as opposed to decrease. But again, for something so underground, I don't think FF14 has any way of knowing or even knew the thing I just said. But in any case, in these cases as well, we ask players refrain from using such mods or remove the offending function from the mod itself. I personally understand the modding culture is rooted in good intentions, but we are given no choice but to act if mods incidentally threaten player motivation or the viability of our services. Let's consider another theoretical mod. One that displays your character completely naked. If this presentation is displayed only on the user's screen, it might fall into the category of personal use and responsibility. Bear in mind that this is my personal interpretation and not a discussion whether that behavior is right or wrong. Yoshi P is one of them, for real, for real. However, if the user posts a screenshot of their naked character publicly on social media, Final Fantasy XIV may itself be subject to legal measures by regulators in certain countries. Laws that regulate the content of video games grow stricter by the year. These laws are there to protect minors for a variety of other reasons, but the fact remains that they are tangibly becoming stricter, and we have a duty to provide our services in adherence to the laws of all countries where FF14 is available. And if we are unable to do so, the distribution of our game can be prohibited. This is another example of damage dealt to our services. All right, this one, I 100% agree. The amount of what's the right word for this? The amount of nonsense that's going on right now with the whole MasterCard and Visa thing is insane. The whole thing with Collective Shout pressuring payment processors to not support and ban games that are even slightly lewd or slightly risque, and getting a lot of collateral damage too, and just getting entire studios' livelihoods completely deplatformed. It's insane. In addition to laws like what's being passed in the UK and probably going to be attempted to be passed here in the US, though God, I hope not. And in the EU, also hope not. Yeah, it's hard for me to not look at that and be very concerned. So what does happen when a bunch of psychos like Collective Shout catch some very pornographic G poses on Twitter and turn their absolute deranged selves on FF14 when they had nothing to do with it? Yeah, I get it. I 100% get it. The post then finishes off with allow me to repeat myself when I say I do not intend for these examples to be a censure of mod users or creators. I only wish to provide some tangible examples of how using certain mods can damage other players, FF14, and the services we provide her, regardless of that mod's original intent. As always, we will do our utmost to keep creating a world where all players can enjoy, even though it may take some time to do so. It is my hope to incorporate player feedback and officially fulfill as many functionality requests as possible. I am also considering how to increase the freedom of choice of players how to increase the freedom of choice players have in the gear they choose to equip. We've been seeing that a lot lately with the gender release sort of thing. Hopefully we see more roles being lifted and restricted off glamours, but you know, I kind of doubt it. We'll see. While respecting the long-standing tradition of modding PC games, I ask all players in return to respect our game by enjoying their fun within the confines of some basic rules. With that business set aside, I am very pleased to announce the next fan festival yesterday on the 12th anniversary of F14. It wouldn't have been possible without you, our players. Thank you all so much for your support thus far, and we hope to have the pleasure of your company as we continue along this incredible journey for years to come. And one more thing for those wondering what comes after the Japan Fan Fest. While I can't give any details yet, rest assured you won't have to wait long. That is from Final Fantasy XIV producer and director Naoki Yoshida. All right. So first off, the last note. Hey, look at that. We're quite possibly you won't have to wait long after Japan Fan Fest for the trio of live letters as well as the media tour. Maybe that means that we're not looking at a May 2027 for 8.0. I would argue it's way too early to guess. It does mean that if I want to get my videos out that get my thoughts on class design to paper, I gotta work fast. Maybe that means I go ahead and axe my thoughts on the story. Maybe I just do that, to be honest, because my thoughts on the story are pretty simple. It started bad. It's getting better. I have high hopes. The end. It's the most vanilla whatever take, and it seems to be shared by almost everyone. But, yeah, I do think that some of the things mentioned here, that the damage that Mare and Mods causes is overblown just by its very nature. That being said, some of the damage that Mare and Mods has caused has not been mentioned here. Massive sink shells going ahead and drawing a whole lot of people to one specific area, one specific server, and causing that one specific server to basically be inoperable if you go anywhere close to where the party was or is. That's a bit of a problem. The fact that it basically had some servers in permalock, like you could just never get into Balmung. So if you had a house on Balmung and wanted people to visit, they're never going to be able to visit ever. It's kind of a bummer. I am kind of surprised. Not one mention of the fact that Mare and Mods use the same blacklist loophole that PlayerScope did was mentioned at all. Not a word on that. That this was all just done on the fact that, yeah, sharing cosmetics and can cause and turns, you know, the modding that's for personal use. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Now it's not personal. Oh. Now this is a problem. So, honestly, very fair post. Very understandable. And quite frankly, it does make me want to go ahead and laugh at every single person out there that sees a modded G pose and goes, "Oh, you can't do that. My God. The game will set you on fire for your sins." Because I do it all the time for my thumbnails. My thumbnails are modded. I'm not going to say aggressively, because it's still recognizable as a game as opposed to pornographic Second Life. Like I've seen things. So you know, I'm glad that we have this line. I'm glad this post was made, even though half of it was this whole thing about ultimate glory stealing that I'm not gonna lie, I think is a non-issue. I think it's a non-issue, especially since ultimates nowadays, you know what the biggest prize is, as someone who's starting to get into ultimate rating but hasn't gotten there yet? You know what the far bigger prize to me is? Because I could care less about how some of the red mage ultimate weapons look. I could care less about the title, because far too often I view the title like a bigger mentor crown, and that there's a decent chance that those people with legend titles are going to fill me with massive disappointment. The far bigger reward to me are the memories. And I admit I'm someone who has the ability to go ahead and record my footage very, very easily and share those memories, share that clear. But they've been putting more and more and more effort ever since DSR into making the final cutscene of clearing an absolute cinematic masterpiece that just absolutely yanks on your heartstrings. And just the memory of that, the memory of seeing like the spirit of Nidhogg and Racefelger going up as the final chapter of the Dragon Song War is said, with all of your friends cheering and crying with happiness that the suffering is over, that you finally got that well earned clear. That, to me, that memory, I want that far more than any shiny weapon. I want that far more than any title. Because it doesn't matter whether I go ahead and use mods to put that on, or go shell out 50 million gil or whatever to get that weapon and title. That's empty. That's empty. That is an empty win. That is as empty as this. That's nothing. I want that feeling. I want that rush. That I want far more than anything in the rating scene. But anyway, that's going to do it for me. I got to get to work. Bye.